Thank you for listening to Pathways and Passions. Remember, these conversations are meant to inspire, not replace professional guidance. Take care of your heart, stay curious, and keep walking your path with passion. Good evening and welcome to Pathways and Passions. This evening I am so honored to have with us Dr. Peter Sacco. And Peter is an author of 30 plus books, fiction and nonfiction, and published on 4 continents. Of the nonfiction books, Peter primarily focuses on mental health issues such as relationships, anger management, communication, and addictions. He's a resident expert and regular of top 50 USA radio and TV markets, including Fox, CBS, ABC, ESPN, Coast to Coast, iHeart, over 100 other major radio and TV networks. So you know I am honored, truly. Peter is an award-winning executive producer, director, screenwriter, over 250 plus awards and film festival selections, over 6 continents. It spreads over 6 continents. Peter's book, The Madonna Complex, you guys, which discussed infidelity and other areas tied to it, has since been made into an award-winning documentary of the same name, still screening at major film festivals around the world. He is a former award-winning TV show host and radio show host of Historical Niagara and the mental health show Matters of the Mind. He has 30 years experience of being a college professor. And I want to welcome you. Welcome you so much. Thank you for being here, Peter.
Thank you for having me, Marcia. It's an absolute honor. It's really fun to do these. I took literally, I want to think about a 6 or 7 year hiatus. I was going over with my wife today, and heck, it's been a long time. And especially living here in Niagara on the lake, which is part like Niagara Falls, Ontario,
Yes.
like a ton of snow out there and nothing to do, basically. It's been so bloody cold. This is great. I'm actually getting out and mingling, so to speak.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. And I love that we had not met. And then we found out that we had been in the same space at the Niagara International Film Festival, and that you won an award there even. So that really, I was just like, this was meant to be.
I told my wife, and she's like, no way. And I said, yeah, Marcia was there last June
Yes,
and
I
the June
was.
before. And so we were there both of those times, both on Sundays, both Sunday mornings, and Sunday afternoon for the one last year as well, too. So we were there because 2 of my films screened, and then we left. We watched the awards, and then we went out for Indian cuisine after. It was a really great day.
Wow. I just thought that was so special. Really, truly special. I just couldn't believe it. So my friends who are watching this from Niagara, and who are watching this from Toronto or any place in Canada, look, who knows? Who knows when and where we're going to meet? So I wanted to thank you, Peter, so much because you answered the call. You answered the call to come on and to just have a discussion. And you know that that's what I love. So today we're going to be talking about vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
On a couple of different situations. So let's just hop into it. So you've worked closely with people around emotional development and relationships for many years. When you hear the word vulnerability, what does it actually look like in real life to people? What does that look like?
I think we have to look at it in different contexts, Marcia, that to be vulnerable, it means making ourselves susceptible.
Mm,
Okay.
mhm,
So then if we're making ourselves susceptible, is it susceptible to physical engagement
mm.
or is it emotional? Because we're putting our emotions out there. And I'll take it and by the way, when I say emotional, we're also talking psychological. I'll put
Yeah.
those two together. And
Yes.
then there also throw mental, like mental health or aspects of it. And then I throw another component in there. A lot of people don't really um, get into. And on my website, there's free books you can download on bullying. And why I did that is a lot of individuals don't believe that you can actually make yourself spiritually vulnerable.
Mhm.
And I've seen this a lot happen in quote unquote religions, churches that individuals are following. And, being an American, everybody, I consider myself, even though I live in Canada, I did most of my studies in the States, and I identify as an American. To be honest, I love the country. And when I was doing my studies down there, everybody knows Jim Jones, like what he was capable of doing. He
Yes.
took vulnerably spiritual individuals that entrusted them with their quest and guidance to find God at the greatest level. And what did he do? Is he used spiritualism to actually destroy them. And so
Yes.
that's why I say I put the spiritual component in there because I've worked as a criminal psychologist. I've taught it for God knows 25 years as a professor, and that is where you see it a lot of it in cults.
Yeah.
Brainwash, psyops, this sort of stuff. So you have to look at it from a biological perspective, mental, emotional perspective, and of course, spiritual perspective as well.
Yes. Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. That's great. How do most people learn what to do with their emotions as they grow up, especially when it comes to closeness and intimacy when we're talking about vulnerability? And I have kind of like a follow-up question about that I'll ask as a part two.
Well, I don't want to play a blame game here. So we'll use it as a teaching guidance game. You're probably going to learn the degree of the ability within yourself to be vulnerable, disclose, develop attachments and what kind of attachments you have based on how mom and dad raised you and watching them interact with each other. People go, well, it's an innate thing, it's born, and no, it is not.
Uh,
I consider myself an eclectic psychologist. I'm primarily cognitive behavioral therapist, reality therapist, but I studied at the Gestalt Institute in Cleveland, clinical hypnotherapy in California, and on my own, I studied psychoanalysis, transactional analysis, and Jungian therapy. And if you look at all of them, obviously, Marcia, what I will use is a monkey see, monkey do model. As a kid, we used to be told that monkey see, monkey do, or my parents used to say, meaning that we're susceptible to kind of seeing how others are behaving. And because we are impressionable, we are more likely to take that on as the constructs that we have in life. And this is a problem because then we become extremely polarized, where we see the world, everything is good, bad, right, wrong, black, white, and there's no gray area. So with this, oftentimes we become vulnerable or lack of vulnerability based on the intimacy, emotional intimacy that our parents had between each other, with us. And then, all bets are off when we start to interact with others. And that's why I became an advocate to stop bullying and doing whatever I can, not only for the victim, but also to get bullies to see what they're doing and to try to change them because bullies themselves are probably the ones that were most vulnerable emotionally that got
mm,
trashed, and then
mm,
they now have to project out. outwards their shame, their rage, the guilt that they have or whatever. And that's, sorry for going a little too long with that, but that is the best way I can look at that or answer that.
I like the bringing things back to attachment styles, and I know that that's like all of the buzz nowadays. But I really find that the way that we attach to our environment, to our parents, to our when we're growing up, has a lot to do with how we have um, learned how to respond to our possible relationship, intimate partners. Um, what you spoke about attachment? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because in one of the criminal psychology classes I created and taught, which was psychopathic minds. So, and this is obviously going to the very extreme. When they did studies on serial killers, interestingly, and those that had uh, sociopathic tendencies, psychopathic tendencies, that not only, some didn't become serial killers, some
Hmm.
became extreme abusers, rapists, even pedophiles, molesters, so to speak. One of the things that was interesting is that they never trusted their mothers. So there's a strong correlation between mothers and children, especially sons. And
Hmm.
what this is trust. And obviously, the most type or the best type of attachment a child can develop, and then we can develop, will carry it forward into our lives with our partners that we date, our
Hmm.
spouses, is a secure attachment. And what's at the root of a secure attachment, Marcia? It's the ability to trust. It's the
Hmm.
ability to be in tune with our emotions, um, the ability to communicate directly with people so we don't become passive aggressive and, manipulate, control, which is a whole thing that ties into narcissistic tendencies.
Hmm.
And we try to lead by example. We try to be flexible and we also try to be cooperative. That is what you see at the heart of a secure attachment. And unfortunately, I think statistics had shown, well, at least when I was teaching it in a course called Communications and Relationships, and then in a course I was teaching codependency as an addiction, I
Hmm.
think up to much as 10 years ago, roughly only 50% of individuals have a secure attachment style.
I think that definitely plays into where we are in today's society regarding intimacy and being able to be intimate with partners. Um, if we're looking at not being able to if we're looking at not being able to be secure and trusting that even if we have some difficulties relating to one another, or even if we have arguments, that we don't just cut things off with that person. But those people who are shown to be secure and who can trust that the person is going to come back, we're going to be allowed to have those difficult conversations, and then we're going to be able to move ahead. But when you get people who have grown up and developed avoidant attachments, they don't know how to. And I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying. No fault of their own. They just have not learned how to relate to someone because they haven't had that experience. Or someone who gets very anxious and overwhelmed, and the other person who may have their own issues cannot even relate to that person and come back and have those conversations. What I find is that people have such a hard time having those hard conversations because they just don't know. They were not exposed to those types of relationships. Okay. Um,
Interestingly, because you
yeah,
brought
go
up,
ahead.
the avoidant personality, that type of individual, ironically, they, in some cases, even in an anxious attachment, they're
Mhm.
actually more vulnerable at times than the secure individual. And I'll tell you why. Because they're coming from a place, Marcia, of fear and desperation.
Mhm.
Therefore, they're going to make themselves become more vulnerable. And we can get into the whole diagnostical and statistical manual looking at personality disorders, where you then start to see dependent, independent personality disorders. And they're not born that way. They're learning once again. Personality
It
disorders are
is.
definitely. However, you can say that because they've done it for a period of time, I firmly believe that in the neuropsychoimmunology study of the bio, we look at psychosomatics. We
Mhm.
have the ability, I believe, and it's been shown with depression, that the more we become depressed or we think depressed, we can actually change our brain chemistry. And I think this also happens to a degree with personality disorders such as independent personality or, dependent personality disorder, which, the pop psychology term is codependent. These
Mhm.
individuals, Marcia, are the ones that are, it's almost like paradoxical. They're extremely vulnerable, but they're vulnerable for all of the wrong reasons, which makes them become more likely to be used, abused, victimized. And then we get into the whole battered spouse syndrome where we see this happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we can learn just as we learned how to become avoidant or become anxious, we can learn to, and we can unlearn those things and develop more secure type of attachments. And the reason why I say that, well, of course, psychology, but I say that because um, our brain and our brain has that ability. We have the ability to make those changes to become a different person. And you see that all across the board. You see people who've been tremendously abused or tremendously, um, for lack of a better word, socioeconomically deprived, right? Who have turned their lives around and who've become wealthy. Those people who have become successful in relationships. So I totally agree. And that's why I love the brain. I think that is so fascinating. Um, yeah. So in your experience, what emotional skills do people tend to lack? Not because they're unwilling, but because they were never taught, since we're talking about that.
I would have to say probably the most basic is empathy.
Okay.
And I did one of the things I think I mentioned to you when we had spoken before. I was a lead vocalist in a band and a guitarist back in the 80s. And I had written stuff and I'm finally now putting it out into music videos. So I'm actually putting stuff out I performed and then I've updated it a bit to release now. And one of the videos I put out had to do with, to a degree, mental health and homelessness. And the
Mm,
reason I did that, Marcia, is, we can kind of understand what it would be like. We look, but the problem is a lot of time we don't look long enough because we don't want to be in that place psychologically, emotionally, and mentally because, so many of us don't want it. Why would we want that?
that's
But
right.
the nature of the music video was to demonstrate, and this is what where I'm going back with empathy is true empathy, I believe, and this is what I wanted to get out in this song and in this music video, is the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes,
Mm,
see what they're enduring and what they've been through and what they're experiencing. But one step further, pun intended, is not only walking in their shoes, but tying up their shoes.
hmm,
And the tying up part is how did they get there in the first place? And because we can understand, okay, well, that person's plight is this is where they are now. What would it be like to walk in their shoes? But a lot of people don't want to go the one backwards, which I believe is the true heart of empathy, is what would it have actually been like to not only tie up those shoes, but we can go back a tertiary level and say, what was it like, or who was it that actually picked those shoes out for them in the first place that they had to tie up and then walk in?
Mm,
And that
mm,
goes all the way back to your upbringing.
yes. And sometimes even before we often talk about parents and grandparents, but do you think that sometimes it can even go back further than that? I
You know, it's interesting. Um, I am a very strong Christian. I believe in him big time. And
yes, sir.
one of the things I learned, Marcia, is I do believe that there is the propensity of generational curses. It's in the Bible. So, you're asking a really good question. And so, yes, I do believe. Um, I believe let's just look at temperament. Studies have shown that temperament can pass not only from your parents, but back, so to
Yeah,
speak. So we're looking at
yeah,
anger. That's been transferred down, but we can look at generational curses. And a generational curse, ironically, is poverty,
yes.
which um, somebody at some generation has to say, I'm sick and tired of this. Enough is enough. And I'm going to break this bond or this cycle. We see it in addictions. We see it in economic status. Because I know my grandparents, my dad, I'm half Italian, half French. My dad's parents came over from Italy. They got out of there before World War One, and it was not a nice place. They came over to Canada with nothing but tattered clothes. That was it. They got no handouts. They got nothing. They had to make everything on their own. And my grandfather was a pig
Mhm,
farmer. He was lucky to do that, and a bricklayer. And my other side, my mom's side, is French. They worked in nickel mines way the heck up north. And a
mhm.
lot of them, they all died of cancer from inhaling the black smoke and all that
The
stuff.
black
But
smoke. Mhm.
that was them. And we're talking about early 1900s, my grandparents came here. Okay. In that period of time, in the mid 1980s, I was the first person in our entire family to make it to post-secondary school.
Okay.
And it all was because my parents said, you're going to do
Mhm.
something, you're going to go. And if it was kind of put bluntly, if you're not going to be living under a roof unless you're going to school or at least getting a full-time job. And at that time, my dad, same thing, grew up, became a bartender, got tired of it. I believe he was one of the first ones to really break free from the cycle, got a job and was working at Ford and became the plant chairman, head of the union. So he got me a job in there. This is how I paid for school. And my dad got me the hottest, hardest, heaviest job in that plant. Within 15 minutes, I wanted to quit. It was like, get me out of here.
That
But
that 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 started breaking the cycle, huh?
bingo, you absolutely nailed it. But he goes, I want to show you what the real world is about, what it is, what you have to do. Because, there was bad stuff that had been done to my family through ages and ages and ages, generations ago, based on just
Mhm.
because of the nationality or whatever. And it was not good. And, we all have that if we really look back into our gene pool. But the problem is if we stay there, and
Yes.
it's like when Christ came to the fellow at the well there at the spring in Bethesda, that man just sat there. And finally, Christ said, get up and go in there. That's all you have to do. You take the first step, and you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And that's how we have to live. And I believe to break generational curses, Marcia, that's the mentality we have to take. That if he is for us, who can be against us? So therefore, as um, a late great mentor of mine, the great Dr. Robert Herbert Schuler, he had the Hour of Power. He
Mhm.
used to say, inch by inch, everything is a cinch. But his greatest line, I thought, speaking with him, was, I would rather attempt to do something great and fail at that than do absolutely nothing and succeed at doing nothing.
Right, right.
And that's the mentality why we keep, you're asking with the generational, not the curses or the behaviors or the mentality. We just take it because we believe this is as good as it gets. Or our parents did it, or grandparents did it, or great grandparents. And then, at the end of it, we go, is that all there is to life?
You were talking about emotions, and when I think about emotions, I think about what is expressed through our DNA, and oftentimes those things are expressed through our DNA, but we don't know it. We don't grow up knowing about biology or knowing that we can actually change our DNA expressions. And I think that is so important that, that's why I love what we're doing here with Pathways and Passions, because we get an opportunity to maybe let somebody know that it's not just because of who you are, but there sometimes those things go back. I know my culture at time for my culture, there are things within us that we have to be able to break that cycle and be able to move forward. You talked about fear, you talked about anger, those kinds of things can be broken. Sad depression, you know, of course there are neurotransmitters that have something to do with that, but we can change that. We can place ourselves into a better or different environment and change those things. And I think that when we're talking about relationships and intimacy and emotional maturity, those are things that we can actually change. You talked about, and we can actually go into that. So many people assume that being emotionally expressive means being emotionally mature. How do you distinguish between those two?
Being emotionally expressive and
Means
being,
being emotionally mature. Is there a difference?
I think so, because there's a lot of individuals, Marcia, that are highly emotional, expressive. They're very expressive.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the course I taught in communications and relationships, oh God, it was back in the late 90s. I remember looking at power plays. These are individuals that use emotions to manipulate and control by using power plays. And two of the power
Okay.
plays was belt lining, which basically translated hitting below the belt, and
Okay.
gunny sacking. So in belt lining, it was basically storing up grievances from the past and
Okay.
using at a later date to get even with people, which
Uh,
i.e. throwing it in their
okay.
face.
Okay.
Then there's as I said, the gunny sacking, which is basically if I don't get my way, I scream, I yell, I have a temper tantrum, I cry, and I withdraw. And you see, these individuals are extremely emotional, but the key here is they're highly emotionally expressive, but they're lacking emotional intelligence because they're not using it in the right context, the right way. And more importantly, they're using it as a passive aggressive way, an aggressive way, or even a very passive way when they withdraw. Whereas an emotionally intelligent individual would use it assertively, meaning, I'm going to tell you, Marcia, how I feel. So let's say you do something and I'm offended or upset by it. It makes me angry. If I'm I'm emotionally not in tune with my EQ, my emotional intelligence,
Yes.
I'm going to say, Marcia, you make me mad.
Yes.
And then you can immediately, and I used to do this in anger management support groups, I would actually challenge people on this. I go, like, they would say, oh, my wife makes me mad. This is the reason why I'm here. This is the reason why I, done the wrong things. I had mothers in there that were there because the kids make me mad, and this is why I'm here. And I would ask them simply, are you a puppet? Are you like a hand puppet? Is somebody got their hand up your kazoo and they make you say and do stuff, they look at me like, no. I said, are you sure of that? Well, no. And I would say, does your wife, your children, your husband own your brain? Do they hold it? And they pull it out whenever they want you to think, and their response would be, no. Well, I just said, rule number one, you're giving that person credit for their ability to, you believe you're perceived credit to control you. But what you're basically doing is projecting your issue with anger onto them and saying, Marcia, when you're making me mad, but rather if I'm in touch with some of my emotions and I'm using it intelligently, I
Yes.
would be like, Marcia, when you say those things to me, I feel
I
angry.
feel.
I'm
Yeah.
owning my feeling. And you see, that's where the intelligence component comes in. We can be emotionally expressive or even go the other way, emotionally ardent, where we don't express our emotions. But then the
Yes.
key part is if you were to ask me, Peter, why? Why are you withdrawing emotionally or why are you expressing so much emotionally? And you're going to get the 100% true answer from me with how I give you the answer to you. Either blame you or I'm owning my feelings.
Yes. 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 I like that. I like being able to showing that not only is it are you responsible for your own feelings, but when we're relating to one another, I need to be and it's not having someone else take responsibility for my feelings, but I need to relate it to that person so that they know I'm not blaming you for it, but this is how I feel. That's definitely communication 101, right? Well, maybe
Bingo.
not. Maybe
No, but
not
it
for
is.
some people, but communication 101. The other person is never responsible for how I receive what I'm feeling.
Mhm.
Right?
And
So,
you're absolutely 100% correct because then it becomes, if we start to get, if you start blaming me about something, well, Peter, you're making me angry. What am I going to start to do? You're now creating the parameters of the game, Marcia. So I'm going to play within the rules of your game where, well, blame me for everything, Marcia. And then I go into the belt lining, hitting below the belt. But do you remember that time, Marcia, when you said and did that to me? You see what
yes.
we've accomplished there?
Yes.
Now we're going down the rabbit hole.
Yes. You know what? I think that this is a perfect time. We had a discussion about narcissism. I think this is a perfect time for you to kind of segue into narcissism because some people would take what we just spoke about and they would turn it around on the person who is
Mhm.
expressing their feelings.
And here's the interesting part. So when we tie it all the way back and to the vulnerability part where we were first talking about, okay? First of all, narcissists, whether they be overt, which, you see what they are, that
Yeah.
grandiose sense of self, they are the greatest thing that's ever been created, blah, 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 blah. Or if they're the scary ones are the covert ones, where they relate to you, they how should they love bomb you or oh you're so great blah 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 so they build
Right.
up and then they're trying to relate to you and then what they'll even do is trauma bond you because you're so great and you're an amazing person. I've never met anybody like you. They will start to introduce stuff that you can save them from or help them out to make you feel special, even more special to them. And what they you don't even realize is unconsciously, you're actually, here's the funny part, making yourself vulnerable to them. Okay.
Yes.
Once again, you're
Yes.
you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart. So what are you doing, Marcia? You're making yourself vulnerable to go into that person's, once again, I'll call it the nest or the spider web, because this is what they're doing. They're weaving you, pulling you in until they condition you. And once conditioned, this is the interesting part you know, with narcissists, a lot, I believe. First of all, I do not believe they're in touch with their emotion because they cannot empathize with other people's emotions. So if
Right.
you can't empathize with what another person's thinking or feeling and what they're going through, but yet you can continually manipulate them, I would
Mm-hmm.
not say they're emotionally intelligent at a high level. What I would say is that they've got a really good IQ where they're good at
Mm-hmm.
mimicking what they
Read.
watch out publicly. They watch it on television, movies, whatever. They
Mm-hmm.
create an imposter syndrome or versions of themselves where they can kind of adapt to individuals and situations and adopt interests or aspects of that person's lifestyle, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they're doing, so to speak. I, they don't, and the reason I say they lack emotional intelligence is since they can't empathize, here is the kicker, the serious part, they have no shame, guilt, or remorse for what they've done. Because at the end of the day, and with most of them, they can't say I'm sorry, they can't apologize. And when they do, they will actually be like, okay, so say that I've offended you, I've upset you, Marcia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the narcissist. And my apology would be is, you know, I had to say what I did because of what you did, and I'm sorry I had to say something about it. That's about the extent of the apology you're going to get. So what they then have you doing is apologizing even more. And I've always said, if you really want to diss a narcissist, don't apologize more than once because they want that, because that's part of the control. That's what it is. And when I've worked with clients, I've worked with students, even friends, I say when you gray rock them or graystone them, pull the emotion out of it. Just a gray rock, gray, nice and boring. It doesn't look like a jewel, a sapphire, an emerald, a diamond. It's just gray. Who the heck wears a gray finger on a gray stone on their wedding finger, or a gray, oh, I'm going to go and get a gray crucifix. No, you want color, you want something beautiful, and that's what emotions are, beauty. It's
Mm-hmm.
within us. That's the way we express ourselves. That's the beauty of our souls, our spirits. And when you pull that away from them, they got nothing. They go away.
Yeah.
So, and I've always said when they criticize, put you down, give them the same remark as you would if you got a compliment. Thank you. Thank you. And if it's just thank you,
Mm-hmm.
it bugs them. I know I played this with them. I did it for fun because I know what they're about, and I know they're squirming, and I'm getting an insight. I shouldn't be saying this, but I get a wonderful enjoyment out of knowing I'm really screwing with that person's mind right now.
Let me ask you this. So, if we're talking to our people who are out there dating and they run into a narcissist, and I know we always talk, there are so many flags now. There are red flags, beige flags, yellow flags, green flags. What are some of the things that people should look out for regarding a narcissist? And in conjunction with that, are there feelings that we might have on the inside when we are dealing with a person with such a personality,
I
so
used
that
to,
we'll know who we know who you are, and we know not to come your way.
yeah, I used to use the analogy in a lecture hall when I was teaching both the codependency as an addiction course
Mhm.
and criminal psychology, criminal minds course. And I would tell students, so we had a bar, a nightclub that was some old gigantic, I want to say a store or a factory. Yeah, it was a store. It was massive. And if,
Mhm.
and this was over 20 years ago. And this thing was turned into a nightclub. It was a bar and it was huge. So it would house probably, you'd have a couple thousand people in there easily. And everybody was driving an hour, 2 hours to go to this place because this was the big thing to go. And I said, if I brought an individual that was a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath in there with his pure intentions of picking up a woman that night that was weak that he could manipulate
Mhm.
and control.
Mhm.
And there was a woman exactly like that in there. they would find each other and he would be buying her drinks probably before last call in there.
Hmm.
And
Tell
part of
us, tell us.
part of that is it's almost like when lions go down to the watering hole, so to speak, they see gazelles, let's say. They're already scoping them out. Same thing with we have wolves down this way, and I'm a big dog fan. I love wolves. We have our dogs, and we watch. Even my wife says, if a dog, one of the dogs has been hurt or whatever, she'll make sure that one of the more aggressive ones won't go around because it's already profiling that as the weak specimen. And in the animal kingdom, much as I hate to say it, they eliminate the weak specimen because of the whole we want, maintain a
Right.
species of the fittest. Well, this is the same kind of principle. The lion or the wolf, when it's going to feed, say that there's a whole selection, they're already profiling the weakest, easiest one to get. And that's what that fellow is going to do. This is, if you look at, um, and this is what my background was in for a very long time is criminal profiling and, studying that. Serial killers, rapists, even pedophiles, not only do they groom, but they select. And they do so by studying. Now, the kicker part of this is the person that they're looking for is the weakest. And I love Tyler Perry. I love Medea. So
Hmm.
imagine if that's Medea at a nightclub and that guy is going to go and try to groom her or get her. She's cracking him over the head with the frying pan, beating him right there on the spot. Whereas if it's a weaker woman that's all bashful and whatever, that is a no, that's going to be the easy one because these fellows aren't going to go and, oh, look at all the gorgeous women that are part of the Canadian or the US boxing team. He ain't going near them. They could be, stunning or whatever, but he knows he doesn't have a chance because they're physically intimidating, but more so if they're doing what they're doing, they're successful, they're psychologically intimidating. And that's
Yes.
why I always loved Medea. I like what Tyler Perry created with her, is because she's a very strong woman. He's taken it over the top, but she's very psychologically intimidating. And I used to see that with my Nona. That was, she never used a frying pan, she used her shoe. She would take it off. And it was like talk about a projectile missile. You could be running and she'd still catch you somewhere on the body. You'd get hit with it. But they look Marcia. They know who to go for. And he goes, he finds her. And the first thing is, you know, she's with her girlfriends or some other or alone. And he would be like, boy, if you were my wife or my girlfriend, I would give you the world. I would be doing this and blah, blah, blah. And that is the person that is their vulnerability is based on I've been rejected enough times, I'm unwanted, I'm unattractive. I'm unlovable. Therefore, they then fall into basically this object relations cycle of I need a guy that will accept me. And unconsciously, I need a guy who is much like my abusive dad or my abusive ex. And only when I get that type of guy and I can get him to be nice to me, treat me respectfully, I can undo all the sins of the past, which means undo the original rejection. And that's how that works out.
Hmm. Now, when you were talking, there is a community of men and I know that they're still out there, but there was a community of men that I was introduced to. I want to say close to 20 years ago, and that community was entitled the
Mhm.
Seduction Community. And some of those, the way it's kind of like this, right? Because women always they lean towards the bad guys sometimes, right? But some of those things that they taught in the seduction community sounded just like what you just told us about. And that was that they could read the woman in the room. They could go into a space and read that this is the type of person that I need to speak with tonight because I want to take I want to take her home, right? I want to have relations with her. But that was their goal. Their goal was to have sexual relations with the women and not develop a an emotional tie to women. I wonder how many of those guys probably fit into that category of narcissism. But I just think that all of this is so interesting. And I think that what you said has told women that we need to be very careful about different types of situations. And I know that it speaks to people, period, that we need to be careful about the people whom we meet in the places that we go. So I appreciate that so much. Um, let's see here. I want to ask you, is there anything out of everything that we've discussed around being vulnerable, um, how 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 does that fit into the dating situation of today? I know if you could talk about, you had some interesting thoughts about the apps and how we date today. And for me, I know that the apps today are a way that people are introducing themselves to one another. But tell us what how you feel about people being vulnerable and sharing on those types of spaces.
Wow, we could spend a week talking about that.
But maybe we might have to come back and talk about that one, Peter.
it it
Just
is
give us a touch. Maybe we might have to come back and talk about that.
I could go so many ways with that. I back almost 20 years ago, it was actually 20 years ago. I wrote a book called Fast Food Dating, Your Two Cents, which looked at all the dating venues and ways of meeting people, from online dating to going to speed dating to even arranged marriages.
Okay.
And then eventually I would speak at the ROM, which is the Royal Ontario Museum of Science in Toronto. And they brought me not normally they bring a person there once to speak. They actually brought me there twice because they had a singles night once a month on Fridays, and you paid like 100 and something bucks. And this was back in, the mid 90s, the late 90s. That's a heck of a lot of money at that point for a meet and greet, and you get some wine, cheese, and you listen to a speaker like me. And there's like a couple of hundred people there, and they're predominantly women. And and I was spoken for, but all the phone numbers I was getting from these women, they go, like, Peter, I can relate. Like, you speak honestly at emotional level that we can understand or whatever. And
Okay.
I said, well, yeah, because I'm here and I've got nothing. I'm only here to educate and to talk and that sort of stuff. So what I saw a shift coming then that was going more towards this online stuff. And I wrote, it's in the updated version of my book, What's Your Anger Type? And I included in their technological rage because at around, oh gosh, 2012 to 2015, I was getting inundated with individuals and I was doing radio shows and that, morning shows, drive home shows, and it was on dating, online dating. And what was happening, Marcia, was it was becoming very paradoxical in the sense that individuals would go on there wanting to meet somebody with all the best and right intentions, but the problem is the selection is too big. So it then becomes too overwhelming, and you're on there a long time. And the longer you stayed on there, it became more like a social media page, like a Facebook page.
Mm.
And then you became addicted to it because you were there on there all the time. And then you were looking at how many people are looking at my profile, responding, contacting me. And then it became habitual that, well, what's another date? What's another date? What's another date? And then it's the what if? What if there's somebody even better than this one that I'm out with? And it's funny because after one lecture, I used to sit around after. I used to just enjoy my students. I love my students. And a whole bunch would linger after lecture and we'd just sit around and chat. And I had at that time four East Indian students, and we were talking about this because it was in the codependency as an addiction class, and a couple of them, they were like 20, 21, and we had been talking about the dating, online dating, and this stuff in the class, and they said, "Sir, never have to worry. I already know who my wife is. I've known her since she was 5 years old because, the
Right.
dowry, it's all
Right.
arranged." And I remember saying, well, on the positive note, guys and ladies, because there was women there too, Indian women, I said on the positive side, at least it's less likely to end in divorce because you don't dare divorce because you're going to disappoint not one set of parents, but both set of parents.
Both.
And this is what it's in for. But the problem is, they're like, yeah, sir, this is it's a very pragmatic relationship done out of the sense of getting married, to have kids, and to keep it going
To keep.
versus how should we say, the passionate, the erotic relationships, which the online dating thing is. So it's almost like polarized opposites where you have this arranged thing versus the erotic. I need to have these types of relationships.
Mhm.
So to answer your question in a roundabout way, the problem became the middle ground was getting lost because individuals were looking for how you even want to put it. Some people would tell me going online and knowing what a person wants, that they're looking for marriage and I'm looking for marriage, it's almost like an arrangement. You know what I mean? So there's
Yes.
an expectation level built in. And then when you find out that that person doesn't want to get married anymore or is not into you, or nowadays with Tinder and all these other ones, you get ghosted, catfished, played individuals. And this is the scary part because you're not in face-to-face person, an individual, and this is scary, really scary, Marcia. I haven't even thought about this until this very minute.
Okay.
What the hell can somebody do with AI now in creating a profile?
Ooh.
You know what I
Ooh.
mean? Creating, because I remember
Yes.
I was
Yes. Yes.
talking to people at the time, a lady friend, and she said she came, she goes, "Do you have?" This was before I'd met my wife. She goes, "Can you get together and have a coffee with me?" I'm very distraught. She goes, "I
Mhm.
went to meet this guy who says he was a former professional football player, and his pictures were really nice." I get there, and this person was nothing like they didn't look at. They were the opposite of,
Yes.
and he had sweat stains all over him and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, "Peter, I am distraught. I don't want to do this anymore." And I remember saying, well, what are you waiting for? Are you going to get a retirement package out of this? Because you've already been at it for 7 years at that time. And I go,
Wow.
people could fake with pictures back then, or if they weren't putting pictures, you knew darn well a lot of them, if they don't have a picture or whatever, they're married or they're cheating or they're not representing themselves properly. But now,
Yes.
Marcia, an individual can just go and say, "Hey, AI, create a really good looking version of me. Here's me. Make me look 20 years younger, uh, 30 pounds lighter, athletic, fit, or whatever." And that, I'm going to bet my bottom dollar, is what's possibly happening out there.
I believe that because I've had conversations with people that I did not know until I said, let's have a meeting online, WhatsApp, whatever. And there are people out there who are creating avatars, trying to look as though they are the person who was on the social media platform. So it is happening. Um, I always look at the dating apps, as I said, as an introduction. And in my work and my business partners' work, what we do is we tell people you still have to get to know a person. I
Mhm.
believe in video dating. Right now, I don't think that AI is at the point of interfacing with you like we are right now, talking, and they've still got a little bit of a ways to go to do that, but I believe it is coming. There are the virtual dates now with the
Mhm.
virtual mass. People have been doing that for years, especially in other cultures, they've been doing that already, dating inside of a virtual world. So I can see where if we're having a conversation like we're having now, I can see that comment. But I think that people need to be so careful today with that online, with meeting people online, because you have to take it. The biggest thing I believe is taking what's online offline, because you had and as soon as you can, because then you actually get to interact with that person. And that leads into a whole other thing about long distance dating and all of that kind of stuff. So
Oh, I've had horror stories when I was writing, we were doing the research, we were doing a documentary, and some of the stories and there was a lot of them, they were
yeah,
horrible, what people
yeah,
had went through. But an interesting concept, and this is probably going to happen if AI really does get to the level of intelligence that some people are worried about, like basically a la the
yeah.
Terminator, that you get,
Mm.
say, you create an AI version of you to talk to me, but little do you know that I've created an AI version of me to talk to you. And then what we then see is the two AI versions, they actually hit it off and they go off and ride off in the sunset. And here we are just sitting around, we're the losers.
Oh, Peter. Oh my gosh. Hey, we have no idea what is about to come our way. We have no idea. But I'm a person who believes in don't stay on a dating app, don't stay online dating too long, because it prolongs the inevitable, right? You can be
Absolutely.
who you want to be, but until you get together with another person, with the other person, you will never know that person. There is a feel, there is a vibration once you meet a person. And I'm a strong believer that those vibrations, now don't get me wrong, because vibrations can also mean that you're just infatuated. So, but to have um, compatibility, to have chemistry, you can have compatibility and you can have chemistry, but it can still be the wrong person and the wrong time for people to meet. So,
And you nailed it. I think one of the problems is you have one too many experiences with online dating that basically all bets are off with vulnerability. You not only are going to less likely to be vulnerable, but you become more hardened, cold, withdrawn, very skeptical, very negative. And that, if you look at that, is ties into, oh, well, gee, I want to meet somebody, but I've always getting burned. I don't trust anybody. And so if I'm new and I just meet you and that's what you're telling me, it's like, oh God, she's the life of the party. I really want to go out with her.
right,
And then she's
right.
sabotaging or he's sabotaging his own ability to meet somebody really nice because of they've already coming from a place of hardened rejection and bitterness, and that's what they're carrying forward.
Yeah, I agree. And then there's the so many picks. You get so overwhelmed because there's so many people that to choose from, that you don't just focus on an individual or a couple of individuals to date out of the so many choices. And then we think, some people may think that, oh my gosh, I have all of these choices.
Hmm.
I don't need to pick and choose. And so they just continue on in that process and never find a person that they can relate to and become intimate with, on any level. So it's give or take, right? So then let me ask you this. If there's one misunderstanding about vulnerability that you wish people would let go of, what would that be?
I think it's fear.
Okay.
And I think when we break it down, it's a fear of trusting oneself. And it's a
Mm,
fear of doubting one's own instincts, one's
mm,
own, I've always, it's, working with cops for God knows how long it was, they always used to say, Doc, we always trust you, always trust your gut, trust gut instinct or whatever. And I think that's what it is. And I think at the end of the day, vulnerability is nothing that we should be afraid of. Rather, we've become hardened to it, or we've become afraid of it because we doubt our choices that we've made, the individuals that we've met, believing in them. And you got to tell yourself, it's not that, and I always tell people, don't call yourself a loser. Don't call yourself whatever it is. Rather, see yourself, first of all, if you're God's masterpiece, you're created perfectly no matter how and what you are.
mm,
He loves you first, and that's all that matters first.
mm,
So remember that you're royalty. You've got his blood in you. So therefore, if Christ could make himself vulnerable, we can all make ourselves vulnerable, but also in the same token, if people reject us and people don't treat us well, Christ never put up with it. He walked away. And I said, that's the
mm,
same thing. It's not that you're abandoning people and not making yourself vulnerable. It's the key is that you're actually giving people a chance, letting people get to know you. But if it doesn't work out, don't take it personally. And let's be realistic, Marcia. We're not going to. What was the statistic I remember once hearing? No matter what you do for people, you could cross the Atlantic Ocean for them 1,000 times over, and they won't even step in the bathtub for you. 10%
mm.
of people, they will never like you no matter what you do. So you got to stop crossing oceans for people that will not even step over a puddle for you.
Mm. Yeah, that's wise. That's wise. I think because, and I think it goes back to how we were brought up, right? If we weren't brought up to explore that part of us, then we don't know how to become vulnerable. But look at this, because I often like to draw parallels between relationships and business, right? Sometimes we allow ourselves to become so much more vulnerable with the people at our workplace than we even do at home. And that's always intrigued me because I should be able to get to know my partner more so and allow my partner to know me more so than I allow people in my place of business.
Mhm.
But what I've seen is that people can get so close. And think about it. We're spending all of that time with people at work, right? And then we come home and we do what? We get ready to go back to work the next day. So we're not really doing as much with our partners sometimes. And that's not everyone, as we do with the people we work with.
It's absolutely true because I remember when I was doing my master's degree in New York State, I remember seeing the most staggering statistic I ever seen that the average amount of time that a couple spends on effective communication every day is 6.5 to 12.5 minutes. That's emotional vulnerability. That's sort of like talking. But a lot of times it's just like, hey, how was your day? Oh, it's good. How was yours? What do you want for supper? But it was more disturbing that the average time a parent spoke with their kids was 2.5 to 4.5 minutes at that time.
Oh my goodness. Well, I hope we've learned since then.
Yeah, but you look at that, that was when I was doing my degree, that was mid 90s, Marcia. So that was basically foretelling the future, those statistics, where we are right now, what you and I are talking about. We wouldn't be talking about this stuff if that stuff wasn't foreshadowing what was
That's
going to
true.
come 20, 30 years later.
That's true. That's true. That is so true. And that's why I do what I do. And I'm sure that that's why you do what you do. Those of us who work in this space, in the relationship space, want to help people get beyond those types of situations to the really meaningful, um, situations of learning how to relate to one another, learning how to love one another, learning how to spend time, and learning that you have to spend time with one another, learning that even like in businesses, you have to create a vision for your family. You have to create a vision for your partner, for you and your partner. Like you were talking about your parents and grandparents, and how each generation got better. We have to spend that time planning, just like we do in business, planning for our families.
Yep. And in order to do that, we have to first learn a plan for ourselves and know not only what we want in life, but who am
Yeah.
I? And
Yes.
the best thing is we always have the present because that's the only moment we can control in our life. So everybody has, you can either rate this moment, you get to choose. You can either be the author of your fortunes or the author of your misfortunes. You get to decide.
Yes. And I always say, I am the architect of my life, right? I can say, creator do this, creator do that, but ultimately the creator in me has to do as you said, get up from this beside the Bethesda, right? Have to get up and to do and begin to create. So we can create, we can change our relationships. We can do that. I want to thank you so much, but I have one more question. Um, what do you hope people take away from this conversation that we've had tonight? If you were to say one thing, what do you hope that people would take away from it?
I think that in order to be the best version of yourself, you have to make that decision to be the best version of yourself. And, when I say that, I don't say it in a philosophical sense, but rather to be the best version of yourself means to continually create yourself, which means you should always be content with what you have, what you've accomplished, but you should never be satisfied because as soon as you become satisfied, you become complacent and you become static and you don't move further along. And then you become bored and then you become discontented with what you have and what you've accomplished. Therefore, if you're content and have an attitude of gratitude, so to speak,
Yes.
and not satisfied, meaning, okay, there's still something more I've got to do. And if you keep moving forward, I think that's how you become the best version of yourself. And I think in that token, you also start to see the better in people. You look for the better in people because you become more sensitive to their needs, empathetic to their desires and emotions. And at the end, you communicate and connect better with them.
I love that, Peter. I want to thank you so much for this discussion. I want to have you back because we have to expound upon some of the other things that came up during this time. So, thank you so much. And where can people find you, sir?
Well, thank you for having me, Marcia, and anybody
Yep.
listening and watching me. You can find me at Peter Andrew Sacco, SACCO.com. You can download, I have books there. You can download them for free. They're Kindle, especially those in relationships and bullying books, different ways. And then also I have a YouTube channel, Historical Niagara TV show, which is some of the fun stuff I've done, especially the documentary and travel stuff in history. So if you've ever wanted to see some cool places, there they are.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I'll make sure to put your information onto the end of this broadcast as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marcy, and everybody. God bless and have a wonderful week.
Wonderful. And that's where I'll end it. Thank you so much, Peter. I had so much fun. You are
Thank
such a
you.
great
I
person to
appreciate it.
speak to.
This was fun. I really appreciate it. Thank you.